Okay, this is the vlog for July 7th, 2018. I'm going to make sure I have my Discord set to do not disturb so it doesn't beep at me. I'm also going to do that to my phone. I've just had a couple moments today where I was interrupted. I was in the middle of spooning up dinner, spooning up salad, when my phone beeped. Somebody was sending me rapid fire text messages, and I'd left the audio ringer on because while I'm on my break, it's much easier for me to notice. But it was a little bit awkward at that particular moment, so. Okay. So today I got up and I started playing more Final Fantasy IV. Now, I could spend a lot of time talking about Final Fantasy IV and the impact that it has had in my life. It's one of the first, in fact, it is the first RPG video game I ever played, or rather, played, because when I had my 10th birthday, I want to say, it might have been 9th, a friend of mine, we rented a Super Nintendo. Dad had to put down a $200 deposit just to rent it. Thankfully, he got his money back because we didn't do anything to the system. But I rented a Super Nintendo, and my friend, who I'd met when I was 5 and kept in touch with, came over for the birthday party, which was a sleepover. And he had a Super Nintendo because Robbie was the rich guy. It's so funny to think of it in those terms, but he was the first one of any of us to have a Super Nintendo. And he had Final Fantasy II. Now, it was called 2 when it was released in America originally, but it was the 4th Final Fantasy game. So I'm going to refer to it as Final Fantasy IV from here on out. We didn't know what to say. We started watching the game and we were very confused because it had this epic sort of scope to it that we'd never seen in a video game before. It required a lot of reading, which was definitely something that we weren't used to. So we actually started reading the lines out loud. Mostly Robbie did, but some of us also sort of joined in. A couple of us picked characters to be the voices of. And so we read aloud the lines of dialogue as he played through the game. He had already played through, and I think he was either close to beating it or had beaten it already. But that was the first experience I ever had with certainly with a JRPG, but in general, just the role-playing game genre as it was in 1991 or 92, whenever that game came. Well, it had to be 90 or 91. I was still living in Minnesota. Anyway, I've been playing the 3D remake that was released originally on the DS 11 years ago. It was later ported to mobile, and then that version was released on Steam, and that's the one I've been playing. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's been a real trip going down memory lane, but seeing everything in 3D and having all these cutscenes with voice acting, very dramatic, very good. That's not really what I want to talk about, even though I've spent 3 minutes doing it. Tenno Con, which is the Warframe annual convention. They've had it for 3 years now, I want to say. Tenno Con was today, or rather this whole weekend, but Tenno Live, which is the live stream for the convention where the new content gets previewed for a live audience. That was today at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Now, it's sort of funny that all of this content got announced today, given that E3 was a full few weeks ago. But it does make sense. Having Tenno Con so close to E3 means that now that all the news from E3 has sort of died down, Warframe gets to have this whole weekend. And in fact, they'll have the next news cycle going forward in gaming for about a week, I imagine, because it was some very impressive stuff. And I'm not just saying that for hyperbole. I'm not going, oh, Warframe, it's the best game ever, because it has its flaws. I've spoken about its flaws. I had bugs trying to play today. It's not a perfect game, but it is made by people who clearly care a whole lot. They don't mind being public. They don't mind having a public face and talking about not just the things that they love, but the things that are silly or problematic. They get into the sort of memes of the franchise and all this stuff. They're good people, and I like them a lot. Just having watched a couple of their dev streams and live streams, I think they do a pretty good job. But the hour I spent watching Tenno live today was nuts. In fact, I can tell you why it's nuts. Is because I started watching it at 3:10, about 10 minutes later than the official start. And at 4 o'clock, I couldn't believe that it had been 50 minutes. It felt like 15. It was jam-packed with stuff. There was never a dull moment from when I started watching. It was absolutely incredible. So, if you haven't watched it yet, spoilers, there's some stuff in it that is sort of spoilerific, and I'm going to talk about a few things that are minor spoilers in this video. So if you don't want to be spoiled for the story up through the sacrifice, go watch something else, and we can come back and talk later. Now, the Plains of Eidolon are a large open world zone that is much bigger than any of the zones that are procedurally generated in Warframe. It's a persistent zone, and it's always the same map when you go there, much like a zone in any MMO or the open world in Skyrim or something like that. Plains of Eidolon, I think, has been in the game maybe a year, probably even less than a year at this point, but it marked a significant upgrade in the way Digital Extremes sort of runs things. It plays, like any other mission in Warframe, except that you sort of rove around the map with floating objectives that aren't set in any particular order or subject matter, for that matter. And rumors have been slowly circulating and finally announced in one of their live streams about a similar zone opening up on Venus. And Venus in the world of Warframe is very curious, because I believe the real Venus in the real world is a pretty warm place. But because the Orokin, the precursor civilization that conquered the solar system and civilized it, because of the terraforming equipment they've used on most of the major planets in the solar system, the Venus in Warframe is very cold and is typically held by the faction known as the Corpus, which are sort of seen as a minor faction overall. The major factions are the Grineer and the sort of sentient bad guys, who are a complete another story. And the sentients are quite rare, but they're the only other really heavy antagonistic force that has been a major opponent for the players in their story. When you're actually doing missions, you actually get about 50-50 Grineer and Corpus, but the Corpus have never been, sort of a serious threat. They're almost sort of a side whatever, because their whole thing is they're about making money. They're a merchant guild gone mad. And so since they're not out to conquer, they're just out to exploit. They're not really taken very seriously. But this new zone, Fortuna, or Fortuna, depending on how you want to pronounce it, it's a debtor's prison. It's where the Corpus send people who've accrued so much debt to their merchant guild that their only choice is hard labor on Venus to keep the terraforming equipment running so that the planet doesn't turn golden crispy in an afternoon. And the delivery, in a 2-minute introduction video with this amazingly catchy song playing in the background, they established everything you really need to know. The people who are sent to this planet have their faces removed, their whole heads replaced with robotic computer-like boxes that I assume probably holds the brain inside or just connects to a hard drive inserted somewhere in the torso. It's a terrible fate, and you'd think these people, of any people, would give up and just work out their lives as, living robot muscle. But they have this amazing, extraordinary culture that was really well expressed in this 2-minute little introduction. And, there's not a lot of story there. There's a debtor's prison. The people here have had all of these terrible things happen to them, and they look like they have no hope, but they do. And you, the player, represent that hope, because you're going to come down and you're going to start improving things. And I've talked about story and how sometimes it's unnecessary. There's not a real story there, there's tone, and there's characterization. There are definitely characters, and you're going to do quests for them. You may do some minor story-related quests for them, like the Saya's Vigil quest in the Plains of Eidolon. But it's just there to give you a grounding and to give you a backdrop to sort of explain why you're doing the things you're doing. But it has a lot of character, and that's what you don't need a long narrative. You don't need to have some 18 chapter quest where you hand this in and go ahead and hear the tale of this person and why they're doing this and their relationship. You don't need that. If you're a space ninja and you're going to come down to Venus and ride around your hoverboard. Next topic. There are going to be hoverboards. They look amazing. Next topic. It's actually past 10 o'clock or 10 minutes, and I need to finish this up quickly. So I can't do it justice. If you really want to know what I was about to talk about, go find the footage of the Railjack feature that they're going to be adding to Warframe. And maybe I'll talk about that tomorrow. But until then, I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.